What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? It's week 12 cashing points. Myself, Grant Barfield, Ryan Heath. This week, fun 11-game slate. Let's get right into it. New York Giants at the Detroit Lions. Giants are 12.5-point underdogs. Total here is 50.5. On the injury front, Jackson Dart did not clear concussion protocol. So we will see Jameis Winston at quarterback this week. Darius Slayton back in the lineup as well. Ryan, this feels like a spot where we just want to play every single Lion. Their team total jumped even higher after Jackson Dart was ruled out to 31.5. Great spot for Jared Goff. Great spot for these running backs. Great spot for the pass catchers as well with no Sam Laporta in the lineup. Things even more condensed. What do you think of the Detroit side of this game here, Ryan?
Yeah, I pretty much just love the entire Detroit side. I'll start with Jared Goff and the pass catchers. So we are showing 9% projected ownership right now. Around the industry is a bit lower. I guess we come in around 7-8%, probably stay single digits. If that's the case, I think he's one of the best tournament play QBs on this slate. We just see him completely crush when he's at home, when he's in these high total games. Since 2023, he's gone over 26 DraftKings points in a third of his games at home. He averages as the QB2 by fantasy points per game at home on the slate. And it's a great schematic matchup for him and for both of his top two receivers against all the man coverage that the Giants play. Goff, top 5 in every category against man coverage. Amon-Ra St. Brown leading the NFL in target share against man coverage. And Jameson Williams sees a 74% increase to his yards per out run. I think it's just a really easy double stack. In the 2 games that we've seen the Lions without Sam Laporta over the past 2 years, we've seen the targets and the receiving yards kind of consolidate up to 55% and 59% respectively just for those 2 players. So yeah, the Goff, St. Brown, Jameson Williams stack, really love it. Giants also vulnerable on the deep ball. I think Jamo works even as a really solid one-off in tournaments as well. The only other thing I really want to emphasize on this side is that I think Jahmyr Gibbs is far and away the best pay up option at any position on the slate. He has gone over 39 DraftKings points in a third of the games that he's played in with at least a 48-point over-under this year. We just see him crush in these high total games. He has had an even better opportunity share since Dan Campbell started calling plays. If you just throw out some David Montgomery garbage time carries at the end of their first Dan Campbell game, it's a great matchup for running backs. We know Gibbs can kind of just break the top off of any slate. So any of these other expensive guys, if you hear me kind of downplaying them, it's really just because the opportunity cost is Jahmyr Gibbs, and that's the direction I want to lean by far the most often.
Yeah, I think that's a really sharp call. Only other guy that I wanted to throw out for Detroit is, when the team total's this high, when you think they could very easily push for 40 points like I do here, David Montgomery does make a little bit of sense at 5,300. Our projection is a bit lower than industry. Doesn't look like Chris Wecht, our projections likes him quite as much as I do, but in these blowout scripts, he needs multiple touchdowns to get you there, but he could absolutely make that happen. Graham, Giants side of this game is pretty interesting, at least for tournaments, given that Jameis Winston is playing, Darius Slayton is back in the lineup. That feels like a fairly clean stack to me. At the very least, you could use Slayton as a bring back in your Lions lineups. What do you think of the Giants side? We also have Wandale projecting for decent ownership here.
Yeah, it's a slightly better spot for Jameis than it was last week. I think we just kind of nailed that as it's his first start. Packers obviously have a good pass defense. Yeah, Slayton playing, I think, is a legitimate boost to Jameis because they just don't really have anything on the outside. I do have a little more interest this week. I will say, though, the Lions have been playing significantly better on defense. They're still just 12th best by EPA allowed per dropback. Over the last 6 weeks, it's mainly their run defense playing extremely well. And I think that kind of does lend itself towards Jameis in this spot. Let's say, Giants can't run the ball. Jameis has to drop back a ton of times. I think he makes some sense this week for sure. Wandale is going to be chalk again, And I was saying I don't want to play Chalk Wandale. I made the mistake of doing that last week. And, it's just one of those things. Like, he has a high floor. The targets have been there, but the ceiling, for him, really, it's been like that one game against Dallas this year where he got a couple deep shots. I don't want to, downplay the ceiling because it's Jameis Winston. He could get 15 targets in this game, in a game they're trailing the whole way. But at the same time, I still think if I'm going to stag Jameis, if I'm going to play a giant bring back, I do think I like Darius Slayton the most.
Yeah, I think he would be my favorite as well. Don't mind Wandale and some Jameis double stacks, but that'll probably be where I get to him pretty much exclusively on this slate.
I wanted just real quick before we move on, because I think this is super important. I think Ryan's Gibbs analysis is spot on. I fully agree. He's pretty much like a lock button play. But if you do play Goff doubles, I think it would make a ton of sense to have a Slayton or Wandale bring back, simply because you want to lean into this game, right? There's 3 games this week where they have a 50 or higher total. You'd want this game to be the one that scores 70. And like we've been talking, Jameis, this is definitely a little better spot.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, Jameis Winston in these games where he's just going to have to chuck it is always a little interesting, and certainly want to get some of his pass catchers in our lineups for that. Let's move on to a game that projects to be pretty similar, at least in terms of how competitive it is. Seattle Seahawks at the Tennessee Titans. Seahawks are favored by 12.5 points here. Total is 40.5. No Alec Iomanner for Tennessee. Ken Walker listed as questionable for Seattle, but Mike McDonald confirmed Walker will play. Not too much to worry about there. Graham, we can skip over the Tennessee side entirely here. Jackson Smith and Jigba is projecting for some ownership at 9,000. For me, it's a little tough to stomach a 9K price tag for a guy who probably needs the opposing team to push for him to get to 4X's salary. He's only averaging 7.8 fantasy points per second half this season. I'm just a bit worried Seattle won't need to throw. Obviously, could argue that the Seahawks can, get him to the bonus, get him a touchdown or two in the first half. But I am worried about this game just playing really, really slow in the second half. What do you think of Seahawks side? What do you think of Ken Walker as well with, he did pop up on the injury report with the glute issue?
Yeah, stick for after the show. Jake and I are going to be doing a little after show party for Titans only contests. We're pitching this to DraftKings where you have to play a min 1 Titan. Yeah.
There's no team in the world that I've seen project. Every single player projects for sub 1% ownership every single week. I mean, the Titans are just totally unplayable. It's been this way for a month and a half. It's wild.
Yeah, Cam Ward's projection has been 12 all year. It's been hilarious. Yeah. All of your JSN analysis, I think, is well founded. I don't want to say ever, but I don't know if I really see an avenue where the Titans do keep this game close, to your point. But I mean, it's just the Seahawks defense has been so good. They've been good all year. They've kind of been trending up as of late. I want to play some Walker, but we've been down this path so many times with this guy, man. You know what's going to happen. I mean, I know it's been trending more towards his way at the goal line, but still, Charbonnet certainly could steal a goal line carrier too. And when the game's close, those could be meaningful for Walker. I think he's a good tournament play, but this is, guys, we say this every week. It's an amazing week at running back. It's one of those weeks where, once again, you're going to have to get your 3 right. And Walker certainly has a lower floor than a lot of plays on the board, but 5,400 is certainly the best price he's been all season. And I don't think, Jake, do you think the ownership is real? Do you think people are going to want to click Walker? Because now we've got Kareem Hunt at 5,100. He projects pretty well. There's just a lot of plays in that range. I think if he's truly sub 10%, then I think he's a pretty good play.
Yeah, I think, earlier in the week I was thinking, now everyone's going to want to land on Kenneth Walker. I think the Q tag might scare some people off. I'd sort of anticipate maybe between 7 and 10% ownership for Walker. I mean, obviously super explosive. I do worry a bit about Charbonnet stealing some touchdowns, but if there's a $5,400 running back who could push for 30 DraftKings points and what is a really clear blowout spot, a spot where Seattle's going to want to run the ball a ton, I think Kenneth Walker makes a lot of sense. Ryan, anything to add on the Seahawks, or any love for the Titans? If so, you might be the only guy in the entire world who's interested in Titans.
Yeah, no love for the Titans. I think Ken Walker is a legitimately awesome play. He averages over 9 yards per carry when he gets at least 2 yards before contact. Titans allowing just over 2.5 yards before contact per attempt. Yeah, all the workload stuff trending his direction. 4 out of 5 goal line carries since the bye. Yeah, I think Walker's legitimately a great play. He is my, like, Emmanuel Wilson aside, he's my favorite, like, 5K range running back play. I think the ceiling's really high. Totally get that we've done this with Ken Walker a million times. I actually could not believe that he popped up on the injury report. That, like, felt like it was scripted when I saw that this afternoon. But yeah, all told, I think he'll be fine. I think he's a solid play. Only other guy to maybe mention is AJ Barner at 3%, 3,300. You're hoping for a tush push TD. And I mean, also there's a very good total here. Seahawks have a top 5 implied total. So that's decent enough as well. So I think those are the only two guys I'm really considering. I'm with you on JSN, and that I think it's a little bit rough.
Yeah, that's a good shout on Barner. He actually did have 11 targets in week 11, and yeah, he does get their tush push stuff. So if you're paying down at tight end, I do think Barner is somewhat reasonable on the Seahawks side. Just a bit worried about pass volume, but he might sneak a touchdown in there regardless. Let's keep it moving. New England Patriots at the Cincinnati Bengals. Patriots are 7-point favorites. Total here is 51.5 on the injury front. Joe Burrow is questionable. Looks unlikely to play. This line sort of moved toward Cincinnati and then back toward New England after practice reports came out today. Assuming he can't go, should be Joe Flacco under center. Flacco off the injury report. Samaje Perine out for another week, so more Chase Brown bell cow. And then Ramondre Stevenson expected back for New England after a full practice on Friday. He is listed as questionable, though. Looks like he will go. Ryan, I mean, this is a spot where I think a little similar to Detroit, we sort of just want to play as many of these New England guys as we possibly can. They're all projecting tremendously well. Clearly starts with Drake May. Interested in your thoughts on him in this passing attack, and then also, of course, this backfield split. You know, I think this backfield, the Seattle backfield, and then the Jacksonville backfield are, you know, some of the iffier spots on the slate that might end up being pretty crucial to get right. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on New England?
Yeah, May is an incredible play, just kind of obviously. These are two offenses that both rank top 6 in pass rate over expectation. Even with there being kind of a bigger spread, I mean, obviously pending Joe Burrow versus Joe Flacco, what happens there? Like the Patriots don't take their foot off the gas. They have the second highest pass rate over expectation while leading in the second half of games. It's just a really, really awesome spot. Big total here. Want some Drake May. Schematically, this matchup kind of helps out Stephon Diggs and Hunter Henry to a pretty large degree. We just see the Bengals kind of funnel everything underneath. Fourth most receiving yards per game allowed within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. It's mostly been Diggs and Henry that we see there. Obviously a great on paper matchup for Henry. We've seen guys like Colston Loveland, Pat Freiermuth, wrong Steelers tight end, just put up 30 plus point weeks against these Bengals. And Diggs' usage has gotten a lot better of late, or at least last week, up to an 89% route share. I think that's a really easy double, just like May, Diggs, Henry. You don't have to double, but I think that is totally viable. You have your pick of bringbacks on the Bengals side. So yeah, love everything about the Patriots passing game. I don't think you need to get into like the Kayshon Bouttys and the Mac Hollinses and these like cheaper deep thready guys. Maybe ultimately one of those guys does end up being the optimal, but I don't think you can really get there outside of like a 150 set. But yeah, the backfield is extremely interesting to me. So Travion Henderson priced up to 6,700, Ramondre Stevenson cheaper. But what's interesting is that kind of around the industry, the way that these projections are looking is it ensures that neither of them are going to be popular plays, in that they just point per dollar wise, they're not going to end up when you click optimize in very many lineups. But depending on how the workload is split, one of them is probably going to end up being a very good play. even if it is much more like 50-50, this is a Bengals defense that's allowing the most schedule adjusted fantasy points to opposing running backs over, I believe, the full season and the past 5 weeks. Like, they've just gotten torched on the ground. So Henderson, especially, I could see getting there on the big plays and on the efficiency. So it's just like a really interesting game theory spot where one of these backs is probably mispriced for the role he's going to have. We just don't know which it is. I want to lean toward Travion Henderson. He's going to be the one that I'm going out of my way to sprinkle into lineups. But I think Stevenson also makes sense from the same kind of point of view. Like, it could just be all him at the goal line and him mostly in the passing game, and then he ends up being a good play.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, we want to target these running backs here. I think my one concern with Henderson is that I'm a bit worried he'll get steamed across the industry as we head into Sunday morning. I think he's going to be everyone's favorite Patriots back. That said, he's still the guy I want to lean towards. I mean, there's, if he's going to be, say, 10% owned, I think there's a higher than 10% chance that he does end up emerging with something like 65, even 70% of backfield XFP, given how he's played. And I think, especially when we compare this backfield to the Jaguars backfield, Ramondre Stevenson is much worse than Travis Etienne. And that, opens up a bit of an opportunity for Henderson to claim some more volume here. Graham, curious on your thoughts on this game, especially the Cincinnati side. Things obviously going to be more condensed. Jamar Chase suspended for this game. So T. Higgins, Chase Brown, these tight ends, the game in general. What do you think here?
Yeah, my only note on the Patriots side is, like, what if Ramondre's still a little hurt? He's got this toe injury. He's still questionable to play. He wasn't fully taken off the injury report today. So I'm with you. I want to lean into Henderson. As for the Bengals, I mean, it's just like very clear. T. Higgins is just way too cheap for this role without Chase. I went back and looked. It went back to 22. All those games are with Burrow. He played one game without Chase with Browning in 23. And in those 5 games across 22 and 23, he averaged 20 PPR points, got 44 targets, averaged 25% of the targets. Matchup just does not concern me at all with Christian Gonzalez. I think he's a good corner, but this is a situation where we're going to get T. Higgins getting a, potential double-digit, potential 12, 13 target game here. And he has a ceiling to, really kind of break the slate. I think he's the best receiver play on this slate, pound for pound. Chase Brown is just too cheap on DraftKings, Jake. Like 6,200 for this role without Samaje Perine is awesome. I think everybody knows he's a great play. Everybody knows he's going to play 80% of the snaps. The only hole that I can poke that makes any logical sense is just this matchup. The Patriots have pretty much allowed nothing on the ground all year, 3rd fewest yards per game allowed. I'm not really sure it matters with Brown all that much because we're not really banking on efficiency with him, especially even at this price. You're just more so banking on the volume and the fact that he's got all the goal line work and all the passing down work locked down. So it's interesting. Like, it'll be Flacco for sure, but no one's gonna play him, and everybody wants to play Higgins, Chase Brown, and I also think Andre Yoshivas is. I don't know how strong of a play he is. I question the ceiling. I don't feel as good about it, like I did with Michael Wilson last week. But that being said, he's going to be a full-time player in this Flacco offense that's averaging 41 pass attempts per game. You could certainly double Flacco this week and be very, very unique in that way and just kind of play some of the running back chalk. That's certainly an interesting way to kind of, flip the chalk build this week because I think we're going to see a lot of ownership on May at the top at quarterback. You're going to see a lot of ownership on Hurts. And I think Mahomes all 3 of those guys will probably be in the same 10 to 15% ownership range. So I do kind of like leaning into some Flacco, leaning into that volume on the Bengals side, and definitely bringing it back with one Patriot, Diggs or Henderson.
Yeah, at least as things stand right now, it looks like Jacoby Brissett is kind of the only cheap guy that's tracking for a decent bit of ownership. Yeah. So I do like that Joe Flacco angle. Chase Brown, I feel really good about the floor and the median. Just going to get peppered with checkdowns, assuming Flacco is a quarterback. And if it somehow ends up being Burrow, the offense should be better. That should help his touchdown equity a bit. Only other guys that I wanted to throw out is we expect Cincinnati to play a good amount of 12 personnel here. So both Mike Gesicki and Noah Fant would be a little interesting. Gesicki would be my clear preference. He's only 2,600. And in the 4 games that he's played with Noah Fant, they've either been like close to 50-50 in terms of their route share, or it's been a clear lean toward Mike Gesicki. And like I said, he's just a bit cheaper here. Our Yoshivas projection is also pretty big here, and obviously Graham mentioned him as a viable play. So I think there's a lot of routes that you could go if you are stacking up Flacco, and overall this is a pretty fun game to target. All right, let's keep it moving. New York Jets at the Baltimore Ravens. Jets are 13.5-point underdogs. Total here is 44.5. On the injury front, no Rashad Bateman. Otherwise fairly clean. Tyrod Taylor will be starting for the New York Jets. Baltimore with an absolutely massive 29-point implied team total. Ryan, when I was looking at things earlier in the week, I immediately thought, oh, Derrick Henry is going to be mega chalk. That's not how he's projecting at all. He's projecting to be 8, 10, 12% around the industry. I think he should be one of the highest owned running backs of the slate. This is a classic spot where we'd want to play Derrick Henry. He's a massive favorite. And the Jets just lost Quinnen Williams. What do you think of Derrick Henry here? Because, when I was thinking of off-the-board running backs earlier today, I was like, oh, Derrick Henry and Ken Walker. With Ken Walker on the injury report, I'm slightly iffier on him, but I still feel great about Henry, man.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. We just haven't had like the multi-touchdown Derrick Henry nuke game really yet this year, but he's been efficient. He just went for 5.7 yards per carry against the Browns, which was supposed to be one of the toughest running back matchups last week. We obviously see every time Derrick Henry's in a positive game script, he benefits a ton. Ranks second in the NFL in fantasy points per snap while leading over the past 3 seasons. So yeah, he's just an awesome play, like a little bit below Jahmyr Gibbs for me. You save some salary on him compared to Gibbs. So he's really solid. That kind of like lessens my enthusiasm for Lamar Jackson. Like I feel like last year we would have these spots where, the Ravens are huge favorites, but sometimes Lamar, because he's like in the MVP race and wants to like pad stats or whatever you might call it, like is just taking everything at the goal line, throwing it everywhere. Lamar's not like an MVP candidate this year. Like he is pretty cheap, 6,700. I totally would get going to him against like all of these other like very highly owned expensive QBs. He still has quite an awesome ceiling. It is Lamar Jackson we're talking about, but yeah, I don't know. I just have way more excitement for Henry. I think it's way more likely to be a Derrick Henry game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Graham. Curious if you have anything to add on the Ravens' thoughts on this game in general.
Yeah, I don't know if Lamar's healthy. The last couple of weeks, rushing's been way down. That can certainly turn, but I mean, it's a hamstring injury, and how many times have we seen these linger? Yeah, I think Henry is an awesome play. I think he's probably my favorite running back play on this slate, especially if you're playing over on FanDuel. He makes a ton of sense. 8,400 over there is way too cheap. Jets side, man, like I kind of just want to full fade it. Ravens defense has been better. They're getting healthier. I don't really have much interest in Breece, even though the role has been much better without Braylon Allen. He's getting all the early down work. Isaiah Davis is really just cutting in on the passing downs, but it feels so thin with this team total. I will say A.D. Mitchell is probably the best Jet this week, and that's in play, like legitimately in play. He's 3,200. He's going to get open. We know he's going to have a full-time role. It's whether or not he can actually catch the ball. I go back and forth whether or not Tyrod is actually a upgrade over Fields. I mean, this year by adjusted net passing yards, Tyrod's been worse. He takes a ton of sacks too. He's at a really high turnover-worthy throw rate. All that being said, though, I mean, really A.D. Mitchell is like their only chance to have like a big play in the passing game in this spot. John Mechie is fine. Isaiah Williams is like just a practice squad guy. Like they don't have much else. They've been splitting Mason Taylor's routes as well. So really that's the only thing I see on this Jets side is really just A.D. Mitchell. Jake, we didn't talk about it this morning. Do you think Breece is in play? I kind of don't with this team total as a huge dog. Like how many times are they going to be in the red zone?
Yeah, I'm leaning no on Breece. I think I'm right there with you where A.D. Mitchell is really the only Jet that I'm targeting this week. 61% route share, 104 air yards, 13.2 expected fantasy points last week when I was running some stuff in SaberSim for some larger field contests using our numbers about an hour ago. I was actually getting as much A.D. Mitchell, roughly 6-7% as I was Luther Burden. And Luther Burden's going to be much more popular. And I think as the cheap punts go, Luther Burden, Devon Vele, A.D. Mitchell are the three guys that kind of stand out to me. And I think I might like A.D. Mitchell the most. Ryan, of course, I am a little bit worried A.D. Mitchell is just the Jets version of Dontavian Wicks, and we're going to keep saying, oh, it's coming, and then it's always just too disappointing. Any final thoughts on A.D. before I move it on?
I legitimately really like A.D. Mitchell as a play this week. Why play Andre Oshavas, who has only exceeded 8 DraftKings fantasy points in 1 out of 5 games that we saw T. Higgins miss last year, when you could play A.D. Mitchell, who has hit, 93.5 air yards in his only 2 games, running more than 30% of the routes this year. He's like triple the yards per route run against single high looks, which the Ravens play a ton of. I just really like A.D. Mitchell. It's irrational. I know he's going to hurt me. A.D. Mitchell has hurt me plenty of times already in his so far short career. So, but yeah, no, I think he makes a ton of sense. I think I'm with you on that. He's at least as good of a play as Burden.
Yeah, and we really don't have a ton of wide receivers in general this week that are projecting well, and we certainly don't have a lot of value wide receivers this week. So I do like that angle on A.D. Mitchell, as gross as it is. I'm sure we'll all play him. We'll watch the balls bounce off his hands. He'll maybe catch one, run for a touchdown, drop it right before the end zone. But that's the world that we live in with A.D. Mitchell. Let's move it on. Indianapolis Colts at the Kansas City Chiefs. Total here is 50.5. Colts are 3.5-point dogs. Only major injury note, no Isaiah Pacheco. In this one, Graham, I'm curious what you think of the Chiefs side here. This is a game that I think is really interesting from a DFS perspective, especially because Jonathan Taylor has been so priced up that he's really not going to end up in a lot of builds. I think most people are going to play this through the Chiefs side with a bring back, using a Michael Pittman, using an Alec Pierce. What do you think of this game?
Yeah, I love Mahomes doubles. I think that makes just a ton of sense on this slate, and it's kind of been a little counterintuitive to how we thought this offense was going to go in terms of Xavier Worthy's involvement, but no, it's really just been Rice and Kelsey just getting a ton of volume over the middle. Kelsey's, last 4 games with Rice had 29 targets. Rice has 35. He's averaging 16.8 PPR points per game in that span. Really, really strong. I think he's too cheap. Colts have been terrible against tight ends this year, giving up 70 yards per game. The one hole you can poke in Rice is that he's not been great against man coverage this season, under 1 yard per route run. The Colts just ran their second highest single game rate of man this season with Sauce Gardner in week 10, but Rice is always a great play, I think, just because this Chiefs offense has the ability to, really just spam targets to him. Last week was really the only game we've not seen that. I don't think you have to bring it back with the Colt. I think you can just play this as Chiefs have to win this game. It's a must-win game to get to 6-5, stay in the AFC wildcard hunt, and the Colts just keep pace. They just score 25, 27 points. This game shoots out. I think if you were playing a bring back on this side, I like Alec Pierce the most. Jake, I think you're kind of right on JT at 10K. It's probably too much, man. Especially on this slate. This is a really tight pricing slate.
Yeah, it is, and there are a lot of really strong running back plays. Hard to justify 10K for Taylor. I'm always thinking of how can this guy get to 4x his salary, and 4x Taylor's salary is 40 DraftKings points. Certainly going to be tough in this game. The only tempting thing with Taylor is that he's going to be basically unowned. He's projecting for 2, 3, 4% across the industry. That's really the only thing that tempts me. But yeah, I'm with you, Graham. I like Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce, 16.4 expected fantasy points per game, 8.5 targets per game since week 7. Both of those numbers lead all Colts pass catchers over that stretch. Both numbers would rank top 13 among all wide receivers over the full season. I'd also argue that excluding Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce is the best ceiling of any Colts pass catcher. So I do really like a Mahomes double stack with Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce. Those guys have been getting the vast majority of the volume, plus Xavier Worthy has been a bit beat up with that ankle issue. And then you bring that back with Alec Pierce. And yeah, I think you capture a lot of the game's upside in that. Ryan, anything else to add on this one?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add really on the Colts side, because I agree, yeah, Taylor's too expensive, and the Rice plus Kelsey matchup is just amazing in terms of what the Colts allow underneath to the slot. All of that, the Rice and Kelsey both great plays. But I do think you can flip it because there's going to be a lot of ownership on Patrick Mahomes, on Rice, on Kelsey. You can play one or both of those guys just with Daniel Jones on the other side. We have seen plenty of times this year, or at least you can imagine, where, okay, there's a bunch of points scored in this game, but Daniel Jones punches in a rushing touchdown or two. He's actually the quarterback that you want in this game that goes off. You can just single him with Alec Pierce, Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren, both totally viable that you can use him with, and just play Jones and one or both of the Chiefs pass catchers. It is another good angle, I think, just because he will not see nearly as much ownership.
Yeah, I like that angle too. One of my notes on this game was that Daniel Jones is the QB2 this season if we only look at fantasy points scored in the first half of games. Very comparable to Sam Darnold, where he's just not really getting pushed. Colts have the largest point differential in the NFL. So yeah, I think this is a bit of a contrarian angle, would be stacking up Daniel Jones, and then very easy to bring it back on the Chiefs side with a Rashee Rice, with a Travis Kelce. Could go with Kareem Hunt. No Pacheco. We know Hunt's going to get the snaps. It's really just a touchdown or bust play with Kareem Hunt, a little bit like David Montgomery at 5,100. You kind of need him to fall into the end zone a couple times, but do think he's viable here. Let's keep it moving. Minnesota Vikings at the Green Bay Packers. Vikings are 6.5-point underdogs. Total here is 41.5. On the injury front, Josh Jacobs, Matthew Golden, Dontavian Wicks, Savion Williams, all questionable for Green Bay. Ryan, I'm curious how you're viewing this running back spot. I think obviously pretty clean if Josh Jacobs plays. We know we always want to play some Josh Jacobs in games where Green Bay is favored. I think a little more interesting to discuss what things would look like if Josh Jacobs doesn't play. Emmanuel Wilson would probably end up pretty chalky here at just 5,300.
Yeah, and I mean, rightfully so, right? Like it was at 94% of the snaps, 100% of the backfield touches after Jacobs went out last week. He's just 5,300. Like just at face value, I think one of the better values, one of the better plays on the slate if we get Wilson here. But I could poke some holes in it. And right now we're showing like 22% projected ownership. I think that's totally reasonable. But if we were to get higher than that, if he kind of becomes everyone's like favorite way to save salary, the Packers actually decided to start throwing the ball after Jacobs got hurt. They were at a negative 16% pass rate over expectation in the first quarter with Jacobs last game. They went to plus 6.5% in the final three quarters. So I do think that, yes, while Wilson is probably going to get most of the work, like it could just be that the Green Bay offense takes a different approach than we're normally used to in this game. And as we've said, there are so many like 5K running back plays. I could easily see like at least one of these guys beating an Emmanuel Wilson. So yeah, just things to think about. Really good play, but not like super invulnerable chalk to me at all. Aside from that, the pass catchers for Green Bay are kind of interesting to me. Normally, I am the Christian Watson guy, but this is like pretty much the worst schematic matchup for Christian Watson that we've gotten so far. Vikings blitzing a ton, playing a ton of too high looks. Both of those things are very bad for Christian Watson's efficiency this year and last year. It would be Romeo Doubs, who's just a few hundred more expensive, that mostly benefits from that. I don't ultimately know how much upside Dobbs has. He's seeing a really solid role, 27% target share in 4 of his last 6 games. Vikings top 5 schedule adjusted matchup to outside receivers. I don't know that I ultimately get to him. It will kind of just be like build dependent, I think.
Yeah, really, Ryan. I'm just shocked that you would have any wide receiver over Christian Watson. Do think those are really good notes on the Vikings side. Emmanuel Wilson, pretty clearly a cash play, but I don't think, and we've had some great running back chalk this year. I wouldn't consider Emmanuel Wilson great running back chalk, closer to good running back chalk. So no shame in getting away from him in tournaments. Graham, any interest in the Vikings side? I mean, seems like everybody's given up on the Vikings after what J.J. McCarthy did last week. He's last in basically all of our advanced passing stats, accurate throw rate, on-target throw percentage. It's bad, man.
Yeah, it's very bad. I mean, we've gone from, kind of having a little hope. Vikings had a 25 team total last week, I think it was. They're down at 17.5 this week, or actually it's down to 17.3 now. I think I'm out on Vikings, pretty much until the rest of the season, until we see something positive from McCarthy. I mean, he can't play pitch and catch, guys. He really can't. There's wide open throws, wide open receivers. Yeah, Addison and Jefferson have dropped a few balls, but I mean, it's been they can't move the ball because they can't complete easy passes. I will say, I don't think I have a whole lot of interest in it, but the only guy who remotely projects well is Aaron Jones. For the Vikings this week, he actually outprojects Justin Jefferson, which is the saddest thing I've said all year. But no, I mean, I think Jones is a bet on volume type play more than anything. Packers can be run on if you play out this game in your head and you think the Vikings keep it close. What's probably Aaron Jones and the run game kind of having a decent game. Last 3 weeks, Packers have given 163 to the Panthers. They gave up 111 to the Eagles and 142 on the ground last week to the Giants. I don't think I'm going to play it. I think I just prefer DeAndre Swift at 5,600 a lot more. But I did want to kind of shout, that Jones does project really well, and he is, playing a ton of snaps, and this is an awesome week in this kind of pocket for sub 6K running backs. But I don't think I'm going to find myself clicking him into mini lineups on Sunday.
Yeah, it's just hard when we have serious doubts about the offense moving the ball. Obviously, tough matchup against this Green Bay defense. Let's keep it moving. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Chicago Bears. Total here is 45.5. Steelers are 2.5-point underdogs. Aaron Rodgers questionable here. Has a wrist injury to his non-throwing hand that he suffered last week. Ryan, I'm curious if you're seeing anything on the Steelers side of this game. I think the Chicago side is a bit more interesting from a DFS perspective, but wanted to get Pittsburgh out of the way here first.
Yeah, I'm as surprised as everyone else is about to be that these words are coming out of my mouth, but I kind of like DK Metcalf this week. It's been quite the ride this year, obviously, acknowledge that. I've been in and out at different points, but this week it feels like a good time to be in, priced down to 5,300. We're showing 8% projected ownership. I'd be a little surprised if it even got to that, honestly. But it's just the perfect spot from a matchup perspective. Bears allowing the second most receiving yards per game on the deep ball. We also see Metcalf's targets per route run triple when his quarterback hasn't been pressured this year. Bears have not been getting a lot of pressure, bottom 4 in pressure rate over expectation. And even if we do get Mason Rudolph starting, I think that might actually be good for his upside. Over 8 Mason Rudolph starts over the past 2 seasons. We have Calvin Ridley and George Pickens combining for 17.4 DraftKings fantasy points per game. And one of them went over 23 DraftKings points in 3 of those 8 games. That's pretty solid for a 5,300 wide receiver at single digit ownership. So I think Metcalf is a legit tournament play. He definitely works as a bring back too if you end up wanting to stack the Bears side, which I also think is interesting, as we'll probably talk about in a minute here. But yeah, shout out DK Metcalf. I'm back in.
Yeah, that's normally I'd say, Ryan, I don't care. I'm not playing DK Metcalf, but this mid 5 range is really, really weak. Wandale's really the only guy who projects decent across the industry, so I don't mind getting to some DK Metcalf. Graham, curious what you think of the Bears side here. The matchup is solid for Rome Odunze. It's solid for Luther Burden. They're not really popping in projections. Caleb Williams is a guy also who's only popped against the worst matchups in the league. And, the Steelers defense does appear to be getting a little bit better in recent weeks. What are your thoughts on Chicago?
Yeah, I don't really have much interest in stacking against the Steelers for that reason anymore. This was a really good matchup to start the year, but they've kind of tightened up. They've changed up some things in terms of, playing Jalen Ramsey at safety, and they just have a very good pass rush. No defense has a faster time to pressure this season than Pittsburgh. That doesn't really line up like a good Caleb Williams spot. Obviously, he could scramble a ton. I do like Odunze more than usual, though. I will say, right now, this looks like a really good matchup on paper, and he's 6,100. He's in a kind of that pricing range, like you were saying, Jake, that there's just not a whole lot of guys that project well, and it's not like Odunze projects amazingly. But yeah, I mean, this is a Steelers secondary that still gives up the second most yards per game to opposing outside wide receivers. Odunze is crushing against man. Steelers play the sixth most man coverage, so I do like that. I also think DeAndre Swift is pretty interesting in this kind of 5,600 range. I think I maybe said it a minute ago, but like the role has been really good. 59% of the snaps in his last 2 games. Steelers have been much better on pass defense. That's mainly because of their pass rush. But, last 2 games, they've given up 95 yards and a touchdown to Kamani Vidal on the ground. They gave up 18 for 99 to Chase Brown. They've just been kind of a bottom 12 run defense, flirting along those lines all year. And Chicago's, 2.5-point favorites. And I don't really think people are going to want to click DeAndre Swift, but he projects really well. We've seen him pop for some ceiling games, and he really hasn't changed his price at all. He's really kind of taken over this backfield once again. I think my favorite way to kind of get contrarian in this game is actually playing Swift with Bears defense and just say like Mason Rudolph might stink. Bears kind of control a game that might be very low scoring. Could certainly see this Bears-Steelers game being pretty slow, run heavy, and not score a ton of points. So I don't know. Am I too biased against Caleb in this spot? Like I feel like he's certainly had a ceiling, but Jake, to your point, like a lot of his ceiling games have been pretty easy to predict in terms of matchup.
Yeah, that's my only concern is with the Steelers defense playing better. I don't know. I always want to get a little Caleb exposure. I know, Odunze has a decent matchup. Luther Burden's really cheap, so I can see the stack popping a little bit. I was still getting some when I sim stuff out in SaberSim earlier today. Ryan, I'm curious if you have any added thoughts on the Bears, Caleb Williams. You going to get there in tournaments?
I think I will get to Caleb. Yeah, I think that double with Caleb, Rome, Burden is decent. I get why nobody wants to play it, but we've seen the Steelers get toasted at times. They're still a top 3 pass funnel by PRO allowed, and that's been a lot of the question with the Bears is just how aggressive will they be in throwing the ball. Understandably, because they've had the run game working well, but I think there's some juice there with Caleb. Burden is like the most interesting to me though, just even as a one-off. So he's at double the yards per out run against single high as against 2 high. Steelers are allowing the most receiving yards per game within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. That's where 61% of Burden's targets have come this year. We've got this constant chorus of coach speak from Ben Johnson this week about wanting to get him more involved. We finally see him banish Olamide Zaccheaus to the bench last week. The role getting a bit better for Burden. I think there's some legitimate juice here at 3,600. You only need like one big play for that to work. And if we do get like the full breakout where he's in like just a completely different role, which I think will happen at some point this year, then next week he'll just be 1 or 2K more expensive and he'll have ownership on him and you won't have had a shot. So yeah, like sprinkling him in some is what I want to do. If he does end up becoming like double digit owned, if he's like everybody's favorite cheap wide receiver, I will pivot more to AD Mitchell. But I think for now, both of them are pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm with you, especially relative to ownership. I might like AD Mitchell a little bit more. We'll see where things end up Sunday morning. Definitely worth keeping an eye on that Luther Burden ownership because I can definitely see the industry steaming him up a bit. Let's move it on to the Jacksonville Jaguars at the Arizona Cardinals. Jags are 2.5-point favorites. Total here is 47.5. On the injury front, no Brian Thomas Jr., no Hunter Long. Brenton Strange is questionable. Cardinals side, no Amari DiMercado or Marvin Harrison Jr. For Arizona. Graham, what are your thoughts on the Jags here? Trevor Lawrence actually projecting reasonably well. I mean, obviously, Jacoby Brissett is a better play and is going to be the clear cash quarterback this week. But, with no BTJ, things are a little bit more condensed than at least what we had this morning for Jaguars pass catchers. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the only way Lawrence really has a ceiling is if he runs for a touchdown, and that feels pretty unpredictable. We look at these two of their last 3 games have been extremely run heavy. They called a negative 6% pass rate under expectation 3 weeks ago against the Raiders now. And then last week against the Chargers, they were at nearly a negative 10% pass rate over expectation. So, I don't really have a whole lot of interest in Lawrence. I do have interest in this run game, though. Like we saw before Bashal Tutin got hurt in that game. He got hurt on the second play of the fourth quarter. To that point, he had 15 carries to ETN's 12. The snaps were close. The inside 10 carries were 4-2 in favor of ETN, but obviously Tutin did score on his. I think Tutin's an awesome tournament play at 4,600. This is a Cardinals defense that is really struggling against the run. They got crushed 3 weeks ago by Dallas for 123 yards in a game that they won. Seattle had 198 on them, and then they just gave up 95 to San Francisco. The Jags have a 25-point implied team total. That's 9th highest on the entire Week 12 slate. It's like 7th highest, I believe, on the main slate. This team projects really well, and no one is going to play Tutin with both guys being active. And I kind of want to just lean into last week was legit. This is at least a split, like some sort of split. Wouldn't surprise me if ETN had 16 carries and Tutin had 12 or vice versa. But, again, he's just 4,600 and this guy has, huge play upside.
Yeah, he's looked really good and like Graham said, really, really cheap. Ryan, Arizona side feels pretty clean. This backfield is super unpredictable, super gross, but we have the greatest Cardinals quarterback of the last half decade in Jacoby Brissett throwing passes, and seemingly all of them are going to Michael Wilson, Trey McBride, both of those guys projecting very, very strongly this week, and I think for great reason. What do you think of the Cardinals side of this game?
Only the last half decade. Like you could go to like Carson Palmer probably.
I was thinking Carson Palmer. I've been joking on Cage Match that he's the greatest Cardinals quarterback ever, but it's probably 2015 Carson Palmer.
Yeah.
Or
so last decade or so. But yeah, I really like this spot for him. All of these Cardinals I'm about to mention are rightfully going to get a lot of ownership, but it's for a really good reason. It's a really good game environment for just passing production. Cardinals are behind only the Chiefs in pass rate over expectation. The Jaguars have allowed the league's highest pass rate over expectation, 3rd most deep receiving yards per game. These are the top 2 offenses in the NFL right now by total pace. So we could see a really high scoring one here. I think there will be ownership on the Cardinals, but I think like nailing a Bashal Tutin bring back is one way to get different in this game. And I'm interested in stacking the Cardinals with Brissett. Trey McBride, again, he's just so undeniable, self-evidently amazing. 24.5 fantasy points per game since Brissett took over. Jags, the second best schedule adjusted matchup for opposing tight ends. And Michael Wilson, the best Cardinals wide receiver of the last, when did Fitz retire? Like 2017, 2018. So last half decade and change there. Only 4,800. It's another amazing matchup. Jaguars top 4 schedule adjusted to opposing outside receivers. Wilson was on the outside for 83% of his routes last week. 40% first read target share, 36 DraftKings fantasy points. Like he'll get ownership, but it's very well deserved. This is not like an industry point chasing spot at all to me. The volume is there. It's just as great of a spot. So really easy double there. And I think the way that you bank in and get different is you just hit on the correct Jaguars bring back. I'm with Graham that it's Bashal Tutin who I have the most interest in.
Yeah, I think that is great analysis there. Only other guy that I wanted to throw out is Jacoby Myers is going to project quite well industry-wide. I think he's a fine play. I'm not going out of my way to jam Jacoby Myers in. I think for tournaments, my favorite angle is probably Tutin. I think me, Graham, and Ryan are all aligned there. All right, let's move it on to the grossest game of the slate. It's Cleveland Browns at the Las Vegas Raiders. Total here, 36.5. Browns, 3.5-point underdogs. Dylan Gabriel did not clear concussion protocol. That means we finally get Shadur Sanders at quarterback for Cleveland. Ryan, I mean, you have to be tremendously excited to play Shadur Sanders. Everyone on Twitter seems to be totally schizophrenic about this guy. I mean, we're all in, right?
I am not. I'm sorry. So anyways, Ashton Genty plus Raiders defense is going to be one of my favorite contrarian angles on the slate. I'm not even joking. I genuinely think there is some juice to Genty. I said earlier in the show that Henry is the second best fantasy points per snap running back with the lead. Ashton Genty is actually the best over the past 3 seasons. Some of this is just a function of when the Raiders offense actually works. Genty has been awesome, which it has only been for a couple of games this season, to be fair. But the Browns, like over the full season, have been very tough against the run. They've been pretty average by schedule adjusted over the last 5 weeks. They're actually a top 5 run funnel now by pass rate over expectation allowed. Some of that, of course, having to do with the quarterback play on the other side that I only expect to remain horrendous. So we could see some good field position here for Genty. Yeah, I think it's a really solid contrarian spot to go Genty plus Raiders D. I even have interest in Brock Bowers as kind of a contrarian pivot off of Trey McBride. I just talked about why Trey McBride's an awesome play, but Bowers $800 cheaper. He gets a man-heavy matchup where he has just been amazing against single high and man coverage this year. He's just a top 6 wide receiver in terms of every efficiency stat against man, 5th in the NFL in target share versus man coverage. It's like a really gross game and game environment, but again, we could see some good field position for the Raiders, potentially some additional just free red zone trips in that way. Bowers is up over 20 DraftKings fantasy points per game if you just count as healthy games this year. So, I have a lot of interest in moving off of McBride, at least some of the time, onto a Bowers where you're going to get 3x the ownership between the two of them.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting contrarian in this angle game. Really, I mean, I'm just in on the running backs plus the defenses. When I was running Sims earlier, I was getting a ton of both defenses. I think it's pretty safe to bet on at least one quarterback in this game being a total disaster, probably both, and we have 2 running backs that correlate pretty heavily with their respective defenses, and Quinshon Judkins of the Browns D or Ashton Genty and the Raiders D. All right, that's enough time on that game. Let's move it on to the Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. Eagles are 3-point favorites. Total is 47.5. Only major injury note here, no Lane Johnson for the Eagles, so their offensive line takes a bit of a hit. Graham, I mean, I think we could argue for almost every Eagle being a pretty good play in this spot against Dallas. You know, pace has been a bit of an issue. We haven't really seen the ceiling games from Philadelphia. We got one great game from Devontae Smith earlier, another great game from Saquon Barkley. But that's been about it. This does feel like a spot where we could get, finally some huge performances from the Eagles. What do you think here on Philadelphia?
Yeah, Hurts has just stayed the same price all year. He's been like 66, 67, 60. He's been the same price. But it's just these Eagles receivers are now down to a point where it does bear the discussion. I pretty much just ignored A.J. Brown for the first 8 weeks of the year, and it kind of paid off well. But now it's okay, he's 5,900. Devonta Smith is way too cheap still. I think Smith is just straight up a better play, but he's just 5,600. And it's okay, I can just double them with Hurts, who's stayed the same price all year. I do think it makes a lot of sense. It's just this matchup with Dallas has just been, it's not just their defense, is giving up a ton of, points to outside wide receivers. It's their game environments have just been awesome. I mean, their offense has been really great. I think that would be my one concern in this spot is that Dallas maybe just doesn't push as much as we typically see. Eagles have a legitimately very good defense as of late. Maybe their pass rush isn't as good as last year, but their secondary has been awesome, giving up just a very, basically bottom 3 in every category in terms of passing statistics, any efficiency metric you look at. I do think this is 1 week to kind of plug your ears and kind of ignore the A.J. Brown noise that's been very clear. But I do want to just be emphatic about Devonta Smith and how good of a spot this is for him. Dallas plays almost exclusively zone. That's been their MO all year, except for one game where they played a little bit of man. They play zone 80% of the time. And Devonta Smith leads this team in yards per route run by nearly 1.4 over A.J. Brown against zone this year. So, if you're just playing one Eagle, to me it'd be Devonta Smith. Just been talking this whole time about Eagles, and it's like, oh yeah, they have Saquon Barkley too. 7,500 is a nice price for him. I straight up prefer Derrick Henry, but like if you were to send this matchup 1,000 times, I think in terms of projection they should be probably pretty equal in terms of both median and ceiling. It's just Barkley with this offensive line losing Cam Jurgens with Lane Johnson. I think I can just kind of paint myself a picture that maybe the ceiling just isn't going to happen in this spot. But I mean, they've come out of the bye, man, and they've passed, well below expectation, nearly negative 10% below expectation in their last 2 games. Barkley has 48 carries. Like, I do love Hurts stacks for maybe the first time all year, maybe the second time, but I certainly could see Barkley like also having kind of that like ceiling game we've been wanting from him. But I also can like paint myself a picture with this offensive line struggling. It's kind of hard. Dallas, man, like I wanted to ask you, like Jake, like this is maybe the first time I can remember all year where I like it's Friday night and Dallas is on our on the slate, and like I don't really feel great about it. And I think that's kind of like underpinning some of my thoughts on this Eagles offense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think the only thing that's really tempting me on Dallas is that no one wants to play Dak Prescott. No one really wants to play George Pickens or CeeDee Lamb. The Eagles have been a little bit weaker to the slot. Pickens isn't really playing in the slot. That would be more of a CeeDee Lamb bump. Ryan, I'll throw it over to you for Cowboys. Curious if you have any angles there. And I did just want to second what Graham said. Really like Devontae Smith in this spot. Also like Saquon Barkley, I think a bit more than Graham does. If only because Dallas has given up the second highest explosive play rate to opposing running backs. So potentially some big juice. I mean, if Saquon isn't breaking off those big plays, he's not really getting you anything. But yeah, Ryan, any other thoughts on this game here?
Not too much on Dallas. I really do think it just comes down to I feel like I've said every single week, if Dak Prescott is low ownership, Dallas Devils are low ownership, I want to play it. And I want to kind of remain consistent on that. Like, yes, this Eagles defense is very solid, but it may not matter for Dak, right? Like we have a lot of good double stack kind of opportunities on this slate. I think Dak fits in there. The main thing I want to circle back to is actually Saquon Barkley. I have like basically no interest in Saquon this week. He hasn't gone over 18 fantasy points in any game that he hasn't had both Lane Johnson and Landon Dickerson on the field the entire time. The Eagles' run game success rate falls to dead last in the NFL over that sample when one of those guys is out. So I just can't get there with Barkley. The Eagles do tend to throw a little bit more in those games when they have banged up offensive lines too. So that also kind of works as a note for the Eagles passing game and for Devontae Smith. Also clearly my favorite if you're just picking one for pretty much all the reasons you guys stated. So yeah, I'm just really focused in on Devontae Smith. And yeah, I think I'll get to some Dak doubles in tournaments, but it's not like a priority play for me this week.
Yeah, I think with Dak, it really is just an ownership angle where no one else is really going to get there, and we do have some pretty cheap, nice one-off pieces on the Eagles side. All right, let's move it on to our final game here. The Atlanta Falcons at the New Orleans Saints. Total here is 40.5. Atlanta, 2.5-point underdog. No Michael Penix or Drake London for Atlanta. Kirk Cousins doesn't really look like the markets have much faith here. That said, Bijan Robinson is projecting to be one of the more popular running back plays on the slate, sort of right behind Jahmyr Gibbs, depending on where you look. Graham, I'm curious what you think about Bijan, what you think about Mooney, even Kyle Pitts here, because obviously last time we saw Kirk Cousins start, it was a complete disaster for all of these guys. They were all super chalky against Miami, and everything sort of fell apart. What are your thoughts on Atlanta?
Yeah, I kind of just want to lean in on Bijan in this spot. I think he and Gibbs are pretty close in terms of projection. I just have more faith in the Lions offense at home against the Giants, and I think like mentally I'm probably just going to be on that, but it doesn't take away from the fact that Bijan is an awesome play. I could certainly see this offense, taking a big step back, not just because Cousins is under center, but because, London has been so good for the past 5 or 6 weeks, really just kind of creating his own offense for the Falcons in a lot of ways. That being said, it could certainly just be like, let's load up Bijan with like 30 touches and just, kind of pin all of our chances to that. Kyle Pitts is fine. He did have 9 targets in the game that London missed earlier this season. He's 4,300. I'll be honest, I think I can probably, even on a tighter slate, I can probably find the 700 to get up to Kelsey, who I just prefer a lot more. I will say Pitts is 4,900 on FanDuel. That's like basically min price for a tight end over there. He's the same price as Taysom Hill and Brock Wright. He is a very, very good play on FanDuel. I think he's going to probably be the highest owned tight end on the slate over there, but I don't really think it matters because the salary saving is so good. I'll throw it over to you guys for the Saints and just ask one question. Like, why are we not jamming in Chris Olave at 6,500? Like, this is an awesome projection for kind of a weird salary range like we've been talking this whole show. And, I mean, the ball is only going to find him.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And Ryan, I mean, this was a guy who you actually highlighted in advanced matchups. So it's not just the raw projection. Obviously Olave's been a volume hound all year. Now Shaheed is off the team. But it looks like the matchup's pretty good too, right, Ryan?
It's an awesome matchup, yeah. So schematically, a ton of single high, ton of cover 3, and a ton of blitzing. Olave is basically top 6 in every efficiency category against all 3 of those defensive tendencies. We've kind of like always the rub on Olave is, he projects great, like the XFP is there, but what's the upside? I think there's actually decent upside in this spot. We've actually seen Tyler Shuck be really aggressive against the blitz this year. He's thrown deep on over 20% of his blitzed dropbacks, which is really encouraging. We have seen the Falcons kind of get cooked by opposing wide receivers these last few weeks. 7th most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed. Ted McMillan obviously going crazy. So I could see it where they're just this aggressive defense that sometimes these skilled wide receivers can kind of beat them and go off against them with the blitz. So yeah, really, really like Olave as a play. The rest of the Saints, I can't get that interested in. Jawan Johnson at 4K is fine. He has a really tough on paper matchup, but still a decent schematic matchup against cover 3 and the blitz. I think Tyler Shuck at 4,400 is also kind of okay. You can do like a really gross, cheap Shuck stack where it's just Shuck, Olave, probably Jawan Johnson, and take your pick on the Falcons side. Bijan probably the best way to go there. So that is possibly in play. I'd probably rather just play Jameis ultimately, but Shuck projects pretty well in our stuff. He's one of our he's our 2nd highest point per dollar projection as of right now. So that is in play for the like GPP MME people. Only other thing I want to say on this game though is I think I have a lot less interest in Bijan than you guys do. This offense has just been so bad with Cousins this year. First of all, they've only gotten to the red zone on 2 of their 13 Kirk Cousins drives. One of those was because of a DPI penalty, and the other was in the 4th quarter when they were down 24 points to the Miami Dolphins. And that's even like in and of itself that was what they looked like with Cousins without London against the Dolphins back in week 8 or whatever that was, is like more reason for me to not be that interested in Bijan in the Falcons offense in general. And Robinson hasn't been targeted nearly as much by Kirk Cousins as we've seen him get targeted by Michael Penix. He's at just a 13.5% target share, just over 16 expected fantasy points per game in Cousins' last 15 games with him. So yeah, when I said earlier, like there are just expensive guys I don't really want to play when I could play Jahmyr Gibbs, that's Bijan is like the poster boy of that for me. I am just very zeroed in on Gibbs being a way better play.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting angle. I would agree. Gibbs certainly a better play if you're playing any sort of cash formats. I would definitely lean toward Jahmyr Gibbs. Only a few other guys that I had notes on. Darnell Mooney has obviously been a huge disappointment this year, but I do think you could make a somewhat okay argument for him just based on raw volume, under 1 yard per route run. But, in this basically like identical spot with Kirk Cousins at quarterback, no Drake London, a month and a half ago, he was the most popular play of the slate. This week, no one's going to play him. I think, the truth in terms of optimal ownership is probably a little bit in between, closer to 10 or 12%. He's projecting for just 3, 4, 5%. Devon Vele also projects as a acceptable value in this game at 3,200 if you're punting. I did kind of like Ryan's angle on the Tyler Shuck stacks. I think if I'm doubling up Tyler Shuck, it's going to be with Chris Olave, Devon Vele, save a ton of salary, and then you can just get to a lot of studs. And then my final note here, Alvin Kamara is projecting for some ownership. He projects okay across the industry. I think they're just better, clearly better mid 5K running backs, especially when you consider ceiling if you're playing tournaments. I know he had 25 opportunities in New Orleans last game, but the juice just isn't there for Kamara. I have a Kamara poster behind me. I love this guy, but it's pretty much over. I'd rather attack it through the passing game here. I think we covered everything here. So that will do it for the Week 12 edition of Cashing Points. Next week we have a Thanksgiving slate. So I will be off on the Friday show, but we will have a Wednesday show with me, Scott Barrett, and I believe Johnny Proctor, who I don't think has confirmed yet, but is generally on our Thanksgiving Cashing Points. So keep an eye for that out. Keep an eye out for that, and I will also have a slate breakdown for the Thanksgiving Day slate. That'll be out on Wednesday as well. Always a fun week, and I hope everybody has a great Week 12. We will see you all at the top of the leaderboards.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.